Yate Aaron White and She, the Bethlehem and Bushes Chi. I am Not A and Shle. I am half Navajo and I'm half Northern Ute from the Uinta-Ori Reservation. And I grew up partly on the reservation, off the reservation, urban Indian from Northern California, traveling between two reservations, the Northern Ute Reservation, Uinta-Ori Agency, and also the Navajo Reservation from Kayenta, Arizona, from Monument Valley area. I grew up around music a lot, influenced from something that was put inside of me from birth, from both my tribes of Northern Ute and Diné Navajo. From the Northern Ute tribe, my grandfather was a singer. He was a drummer. He traveled around the United States through different reservations, performing music through ceremony, but also through social songs. And so that's what he did for a living. He traveled around and sang for people. He had a very beautiful voice. I never met my grandfather. He passed before my birth. But my other grandfather was also a medicine man and also a singer. And he traveled all the way up to Canada, he worked on the railroads, and he learned different songs from different people that he met. They say that Navajo people, you can find them everywhere. You know, we're like aluminum cans. You know, you can find us all over the place. And so my grandfather was with the group of Navajo men from the Navajo Reservation. And he took on an apprenticeship to be a medicine man. And so that's what he did for the rest of his life, was he went and did ceremonies for people, but he also sang songs. He learned all these traditional songs, as my other grandfather on my Ute side did. So that seed was instilled in me from my father and from my mother. Music was always a part of our family. Even as a young child, I can remember songs on the radio or the turntable and people gathering at our house in this little tiny town of about 500 people in White Rocks, Utah, on the Uinta-Ori Reservation. And my mother and father separated when I was a very young boy. So I went to live with my mother on the Uinta-Ori Reservation. And we had music playing all the time, whether it would be traditional music, whether it be modern music of, you know, R&B and jazz and blues, or just, you know, top 40 music on the radio. But also what happened was, when I was a little boy, I would go to ceremonies. I'd go to sundances with my mother, and my grandmother and my uncles were dancers, and my uncles were also drummers in the Sundance Chorale. And we would go and we would emulate these sounds of the dancers. We'd go and draw a circle in the ground, and we would make our little trail that each dancer has to dance to the tree, and we would make our little trail, and we'd emulate the dancers, and we'd whistle like the eagle bone whistles. And so we would do these things in the traditional sense of the music, and my cousins would be sitting on the side with a cardboard box, and they'd be hitting it and singing these, emulating these songs that were sung. And back on the Navajo Reservation, when we go visit my grandmother, when I was living with my father in Oakland, California, we would go back to the reservation, and I would hear the songs, the traditional songs from the Yebeche dances, or I'd hear the songs from these meetings that were being held in different places. And so I would hear the drum, I would hear the sound of the music. But as I grew older and I grew up, I was listening and playing modern music. And so I would listen to a lot of different music growing up in the Bay Area. And so I would hear traditional songs, and then we'd go to these gatherings of powwows around the Bay Area. Stanford University has a huge Native American powwow at Stanford University, the Memorial Day powwow they have every year. We'd go to UC Davis. We'd go down to San Jose, California, big powwows going on. But during that time was also a time where I grew up in the 70s, and the late 60s and the 70s, we had Alcatraz. We had a little place called the Friendship House on what used to be called East 14th Street. It's called American Boulevard now, or International Boulevard in Oakland. But we would go there, and people would gather, and they would sing, and they would dance, they would share things. Lakota people, Navajo people, Anishinaabe, Hopi, Apache, all the different tribes that lived in the Bay Area, they would gather and they would sing their songs. And I had never seen anybody play Native American flute when I was growing up as a child. I didn't learn about the Native American flute until I became an older man, had a family. And it was a different journey. It was a journey that took me to a whole different place. I learned about our people from long ago, 50,000 years ago, our ancestors, the Anasazi, the Fremont, which is also up near, as far as Wyoming, up to the Canadian border, the association between these civilizations, but they had the same building techniques. They had the same sort of callings and learning how to make these instruments. This instrument I have in front of me right now is river cane flute. River cane flutes are very, very important part of the Diné culture. We call it luk'a in Navajo, it's reed. And it's part of our creation story. Our creation story of the 4 different worlds. The darkness, the dark world, which is the black. The blue world, which is the water. The yellow world, which is the light, and then the white world that we live in right now, the 4th world. This traveled through all 4 parts of that world that we are in, and it is part of that creation story. On our youth side, we have the flute given to us from the animals, from the birds. The woodpecker was the one that created the sound, that created the river cane flutes, and also the aspen flutes and the pine flutes. The old woods that were used, because we didn't have modern tools to carve, so we had to use obsidian knives. We had to use sharp objects to create these flutes. Branch flutes, which were cut in half and then put back together with tree sap, binded with strands of hide from the hunts. And so there's a lot of different methods, a lot of different ways that we created the flutes. But the cane flute, the river cane flute, is not only shared amongst the Navajo people, the Hopi, Supai, Wallapai, Toda Odom, the Gila River, the Colorado River tribes. All these tribes here in Arizona have a connection with the cane flute, which is a vital part of their culture and their history and their ceremony. So what I like to do is start off with playing this cane flute for you. And this is a little piece that I composed called River Cane Honor Song. Thank you. As a musician in a modern world playing a traditional instrument, when I picked up making and began to form this music that I called more of a newer type of, not new age. We were always put in the new age category, I don't know why. But, you know, we created this sound when I started this group called Burning Sky back in 1993. And at the time, there were no groups that were trio groups or groups that were playing the Native American flute with modern instruments like guitar. and with percussion, more of an aggressive way of bringing the flute out. We had R. Carlos Nakai, who is also Diné and Ute, and he was doing more of the traditional sense of the instrument. But I had met a young boy, I call him young boy, he was just out of high school, and his name was Kelvin Bizahalani. He was from Pinyon area, his family. And so we had been put together in a meeting, and I was looking for another musician to create a whole different sound of fusing Native American flute and guitar. And so we created this sound in my bedroom, in my home. And then we made a demo, and this demo was taken from a friend of ours and was given to the record label, Canyon Records, which is the largest Native American label in the world. And so they signed us to a contract. And so we were doing performances after people had heard our music. We were hired to perform all over the country. And we were doing a performance at the Native American Music Festival in Oakland, California. And we had gotten an offer to go down to Malibu to do a performance at the Frank Lloyd Wright Ranch, which is the Wright Ranch up in Solstice Canyon. And so we flew down there and met a bunch of other musicians, and we met this Anglo guy, Michael Bannister, who performed with Peter Case and had performed with a lot of different great musicians. And he heard our sound, and he said, "I can help you guys out. I'm a percussion player." So we got together, and he just by chance happened to move back to Flagstaff. And it was pretty amazing. And you know, we created all these different things and all these different sounds of music, and it just exploded from there. And we had a good time making this music. We put out 7 records with Canyon Records, just by using a very simple instrument, a traditional instrument, in that sense of being able to create an old sound into a new sound and fusing it with modern instruments. And you can hear our music, you know, in different places. You probably heard it in documentaries and films and different soundtracks. But each flute has a different tone, has a different sound, but it comes from old traditional tunings of the ancient tunings by using measurements of the hand and by using measurements of the arm. And so you would measure a fist to the first note, and then a finger's width between each one, a fist to what they call the fipple, and then the end, however long the extended part of the flute wanted to be. So we created all these different flutes when I began to make flutes, and we kept that sense of the traditional sound and the tone, which is more or less in a pentatonic scale. And so by European standards and European influence, those scales became the proper notes to play on the flute. But the ancient flutes were the ones that were sounds of how the hands were measured, and they just happened to fall into those modern scales of Western music. And so I want to play a real quick piece for you on this next flute I have, which is all made out of cedar. This next one I have is a drone flute, and I carved an eagle head. I just actually finished this one a few days ago, and I did some burn work, some eagle feathers on it, and also the drone flutes, again, go back about 500 BC, the time of the Egyptians, and also to the Aztec, Mayan, Inca cultures. The drone flutes have been around for a very, very long time, but there was remnants of flutes that were found amongst the Anasazi ruins of cane flutes tied side by side. So of course we all know that civilizations migrated north, south, east, west. Our Diné people come from around the Athabascan area up around the Arctic Circle. The Ute people come from around the Aztec Mayan area because we speak Uto-Azteca is what our dialect is. And so the people migrated, the flutes migrated, influences came from different areas of how to create these different flutes, whether they were found during wartime, peacetime, trading, whatnot. It all fused together, and all these beautiful instruments have thrived even today. And we still make the flutes in that traditional sense, keeping their cultural significance, but also taking them and pushing them into modern music. So I want to play this one for you before I have to end here. And again, thank you guys for letting me be a part of this evening, and I hope you guys enjoyed hearing the music. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Aaron White, and you can check out our music, Burning Sky and Sky Chasers and Bluestone Project. And thank you again very much.